Hi, Ray Middleton here, System Broker at Mental Health Concern and Fulfilling Lives. Next, we're going to interview Sophie Boobis, our data analyst, with some ideas about the evaluation side of PI, which is one of the 5 or 6 main principles. And today on the PI training, we're really pleased to have Sophie Boobis here. And so Sophie, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Yes, hi Ray. My name's Sophie. I'm part of the Fulfilling Lives team, and my role is research and evaluation lead. So I'm responsible for evaluating, looking into, kind of finding out what's working within the whole Fulfilling Lives program, including the PI pilots.
Thanks, Sophie. So could you just say a little bit about what you're actually doing? We've piloted these 3 PIs, and could you just say a bit about what you're doing to evaluate them at the moment?
Yeah, so we want to see what the effect of the PI pilots were, whether they've made a difference. So we've been running focus groups and interviews with all the participants and managers at the 3 services where the pilots were run, and from those we're going to try and pull out any themes or trends, what outcomes have people been found. We're not trying to predict what the PI might have achieved. We're letting the participants lead it, and from that we're going to try and see if we can pull out a framework of what we might expect in the future for PI as well.
That's really helpful, and so I look forward to seeing how that develops, and what we find. And then I think part of the idea of the PI is to reflect on what you find and then maybe change something, so it's a kind of ongoing process. So it'd be great to see that evaluation. So I think we've already seen about there's 5 or 6 points to a PI, so that's like the training and support for staff, but the support has a focus on reflective practice where you bring the staff together to reflect on the work they're doing, and that introduces a framework of some kind. It's not prescriptive about which framework, but a framework of some kind to help shape up the conversation and reflection. There's also a concentration on relationships and looking at improving the quality of relationships and focusing on that. And the final point is about thinking about the physical space and how that lends itself or doesn't towards being able to reflect with clients. And the last point is what we're talking about just now, which is about having it different ways to generate some evidence for, if you introduce a PI, what differences it made. So I wondered if you had any kind of tips for people in terms of that evidence generating around those 5 or 6 points of a PI. How might people start to gather some evidence if they introduce that about what difference they've made?
Yeah, I think it fits very nicely with the same ethos of reflecting. So evaluation is just reflection. It's nothing big or fancy about it. It's just looking back and seeing, has anything changed? If you were introducing a PI, the best way would be to get some kind of baseline, to start with saying this is what it's like now, this is what people think now, and then to look at it again. And really I think the simplest way of doing this would be some kind of staff survey or team survey. It's always best to do anonymous and make it very clear that your answers aren't going to affect your position, because people are much more likely to be honest, and just to ask some really simple questions on those 5 areas. So, do you have the space to reflect? Is that space valuable? You might give the time over to reflect, but then it might not be worth it. Whereas after you've introduced the PI, it might change that. And just ask the same questions again at points in the future and see if you're seeing a change. I mean, that would be the simplest and easiest way of doing it, and I think would probably give you some very valuable information. And you might see that in some areas that you are seeing change and others aren't. So yes, we've got space for reflection, my communication with clients is improving, but we don't have a physical space. And then you can say, well, actually we're not picking up that, and it should be fairly simple to kind of implement that.
That's great. And I suppose that kind of I like the way you link that with the general idea of reflecting on what you find, but that's not a fixed point in time, because then you might make some changes based on what people say, and then you might try a bit more of the PI principles.
Absolutely.
And then you might reflect again in another 6 months and learn something else. So it's a kind of a relationship between the evidence gathering, having a reflection on what you found, and then maybe making some changes.
Yeah, it's action learning. So it's not that evaluation isn't it's not marking you or anything like that. It's not saying, oh, you've not achieved it, it's not worth it. It's about seeing what's working, what's not, and using that, as you say, to kind of loop back into what you're doing and go, oh, we've got that, seems to be working really well, but maybe that's not, or can we improve here? And and you can look at why it's not working. So, okay, people are feeling really good about the reflective space, they're using the framework really well, but maybe we're not seeing that relationship with clients working so well. Why not? And then you can explore that further with your team and say, you know, what's going on, instead of going, it's not working, let's just not bother.
That sounds great, because one of the ideas is to think of Pi more of a journey than a switch that's on or off. So it might be, as you just described well there, 3 or 4 parts of that journey are going well, but there's one that we seem to be stuck on, and then together you can reflect and think, I wonder why we're a bit stuck about this 0.4 or 5 of this Pi, and then think about how to move on that journey a bit better. And there might be some really good ideas from clients using the service, or staff, or from other places, that just help you to move along and progress.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, absolutely worth involving clients in that evaluation process if you can, in asking them, have they noticed a change in how staff are interacting? Because, and again, really simple questions can give you a lot of information. It doesn't have to be sort of fancy or complicated survey or anything like that, just really basic questions.
So that's great. So thanks a lot, Sophie, for coming along and having a chat about evaluation. I really appreciate it. And it's given some food for thought for people to think, actually, evidence generating practice is important when you're trying something new and innovative, and it can be quite straightforward. It doesn't have to be massively complicated.
Yes.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Sophie.
Ray.